In this video, I'll be working on the guitar top bracing.
Building a tenor guitar, part 16 at randallprice.com.
In the last video, I rough cut the brace stock to size and then cut the braces for the guitar back. And the guitar back bracing is pretty simple. There's only 4 braces that run perpendicular to the grain on the back, and they have a pretty simple profile and tapered ends. For now, I'm going to set the back aside and work on the top bracing. The top bracing, as compared to the back, is a lot more complex. The top has 9 braces on it, and they run at all different angles, and the profiles are a little bit different than on the back, and they're also scalloped on the ends. So the top's a little bit more complicated bracing pattern and more complicated bracings than the back. Also, the 2 main braces that run across the top, these X braces, have a half lap joint in the middle, so I'll need to make that half lap joint. I want to cut out all these braces and fit them into place before I glue them to the top, just to make sure that they're all going to fit and that they fit together as they should, as outlined on the blueprint. So to get started, I'm going to make this half lap joint on the 2 main X braces. These 2 X braces meet at an angle about like that, and this angle is not a right angle, it's actually 94-degree angle. So I've taken my protractor and set it to 94 degrees, and then use that to set my bevel gauge to 94 degrees. And I'll use the bevel gauge to mark my brace to cut it at that angle. I'm going to lay my brace on the pattern and mark directly from the pattern approximately where I want this angle to be. And putting this bevel gauge in place, mark one side of that angle that I want to cut. I'll take the other brace and, using that bevel gauge as a guide, I'll lay the brace on the line that I just drew. Make the other line. So now I have 2 layout lines for that brace. The brace is a 3/8 of an inch thick, so I want to cut halfway down on this brace and do the same on the other brace. So to mark that depth, I'm just going to use gauge blocks. I have a 1/8 inch gauge block and a 1/16, so that's going to make 3/16 of an inch, which is half of 3/8. And I'll just mark that on both sides. I'll take my engineering square and transfer that 2 top lines down to that depth line, and then I'll have my joint laid out so I can cut it. So there's the layout for the first joint, and I'll come around and bring that a little bit closer to the camera so you can see. So there's that 94-degree angle, and I have that transferred down to both sides. I'll cut this out with a small back saw. And this saw is actually a saw for cutting string grooves in a guitar nut, but it'll work fine for this. And I'm just going to cut this freehand. I'll clamp this brace down to my bench top. I'll cut inside the lines, and that way I can trim the width of that cut out so I get a snug fit with the other brace. fits a little bit tight, I'll get a little bit wider chisel and trim that to size. Now to lay out the angle on this other brace, I'm taking the one that I haven't cut yet and laying it in the place of the first brace. Then I'll simply set this one on top. I'll line it up on my blueprint so it's a proper angle. Then I'll just take my measurements directly from that brace. Then the depth of that brace needs to be the same as what's left on the brace that I just cut. So there's a layout for that one. And I'll do the same thing, just try to cut slightly inside that line and fit it with a chisel. Okay, there we go. Nice, tight fitting joint. And now these braces are glued in place yet. I just have them clamped to hold them in position. I've got the X brace on here and this upper transverse brace. Next I want to work on these 3 sound hole braces, and they're all 3/8 by 1/8 inch pieces, rather thin pieces, so I need to determine the angles for those and get those cut out. Okay, to get the angles on these, which is right here, the piece lies in this position and I need to cut an angle about right there. Just lay this piece on the blueprint and mark that angle on both sides. Then I'll just join those 2 lines together. I'll just go ahead and cut that and use this as a rough angle to fit it into the corresponding brace on the guitar top. Just clamp this to my bench top and quickly cut that. Now I'll just eyeball this, laying it in place over its actual position. And that looks pretty good. So I'll just hold this tight against that brace. I'm lining the brace up over the pattern on the guitar top. I'll mark it the same way that I did the other end. I'll join those 2 points together. Make that cut and see how it fits. See, the angle is a little bit off. I'm going to correct that a little bit. Just off by less than the width of a pencil line. I'll just correct that using a sanding block. That looks good. Now this brace is still a square profile, and if I can move my camera down a little bit closer to the blueprint, it needs to have this rounded over profile, so I'll just round that over by sanding that by hand. I need to smooth this top and then round over each edge. I'll just sand that by hand to get to that profile. So there's that piece rounded over. Sanding was kind of slow going, so I actually used my block plane. I planed a chamfer on the edge of that and then sanded it round. I'll mark out the second or the corresponding sound hole brace using this one, and then I'll show you how I use the block plane to round that over. Okay, I have this brace cut to length, and to chamfer that corner, it's kind of hard for me to do up in the air like this. Usually I have this on the bench, but I'll just make a few passes over the block plane. You see that's starting to bevel. I have the plane set to a pretty shallow cut so I don't take too much off. You can kind of see the bevel that I'm cutting in there. And I'll do that on both sides, kind of get that 45-degree bevel, and then I'll cut a slight bevel on each side of those, starting to round it over, and then I'll finish it up with a sandpaper. So that's rounded over pretty good. I'll just do a little more touch-up work on there, a little more sanding, and that piece will be ready. I did this third sound hole brace, the same as the other two, and there are the three braces in place.
On Building a Tenor Guitar Part 17, I'll complete cutting and shaping the top bracing and begin gluing the bracing to the top. For woodworking plans, tips, and techniques, visit randallprice.com.